Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the local planning agency in the village of Tequesta. It is February 16th. It is 5:30 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Janet Strand.
Here.
Steve Egan.
Here.
Elizabeth Shower.
I don't have a mic, but here.
Leslie
Just
Asher.
here.
Teresa Maggio.
Here.
Sherry Ambrose. Here. Jean Vagabond.
Here.
Marie Superior.
Yeah, we can share.
Thank
You're
you.
really in good shape, too.
Our next item on our agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda. May I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Our next item is the approval of meeting minutes from the previous meeting of November 17th, 2022. I'll open it to the board. Did y'all have a chance to review these minutes?
Yes. Yes.
And can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Do you want to do ex parte now, or?
Madam Chair, there are no applications in front of the board this evening. Some
Okay.
ordinance review, things like that. So
Okay.
it won't be necessary.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next agenda item is ordinance number 3-23. An ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta amending the Village Code of Ordinances at Chapter 78 zoning. At Article 9 Supplemental Regulations, Section 78-284, walls and fences to allow walls and fences to be located forward of the front building line in certain circumstances, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 zoning shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflict of clause, severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes. This goes to Nilsson now, right? And I'm going to open the floor to Lance Lilly.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. The application that we have today, or the ordinance we have today, is 0323, which is mentioned by our board chair. The board may be familiar with these. We've had quite a bit of fences throughout the years that have been forward of the building front, so we've had variances for them. So if you actually refer to page 9 of your package, page 9 includes a memo that we provided to you guys, and it talks about the table 1, which shows the various variances that we've had amongst throughout the years. So from 2016 to 2021, we've had about 4 variances, which were 3 of them were approved. And the main intent of the code, if you were to look onto page 11, which shows a map, it's right here. The map shows essentially that the areas that were approved through this board, or through the Planning and Zoning Board, are areas that were longer lots, and lots that essentially they did not have really a rear yard, and the justification through a lot of them was that since their rear yards were so condensed, since they're on the river, that they needed their front yard to be their rear yard, essentially. So if you go back to our code that we have here, we're proposing that any lot that's either greater or equal to 250 feet, that essentially that this code would apply to them and their fences would be allowed to be in the front of the building.
I do have to say thank you. I thought it would take longer to have this kind of an ordinance, but thank you.
And I'll open the floor to the board. Are there any questions?
So my question is, so on this map, there's on the river, so we have these dimensions. That dimension is the length of the lot of these lots?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about? Okay.
Yes.
So basically, and you guys are putting this because all of these parcels qualify.
Yes. So essentially, as you know, when we had some of those other variances, we had like a number of them that kept coming through, and they were using the same kind of justification for it.
Okay.
So this wouldn't apply to like your regular lots, like near Village Hall or even the
Or
country
like
club or
this
whatnot.
stuff over here,
Yeah.
even though it's on here,
Yeah.
this doesn't apply.
No,
So
it's only the ones that
really
have the
just
numbers.
these ones that have the numbers.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions, board?
Do you have to take public comment?
Yeah, I would advise opening it up. Once the board is finished discussing,
Sure.
open up the public comment section.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. I would like to open the floor for public comment.
Thomas Bradford?
Good evening. My name is Thomas Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail, Tequesta. I'm concerned with the proposed language. I think I understand the problem. I have always felt, particularly that any lot that is on a busy street, busier than a typical residential street in a subdivision, would benefit from the ability to have walls or fences at the property line that abuts the street. But I won't go into that. Let me just jump straight into what I think the problem is with the language. It basically, what you're saying you want to propose, and I think I verified that it was in the ordinance, walls and fences not exceeding 6 feet in height may be located forward of the front building line on lots or parcels having a side lot greater than 250 feet and the front line greater than equal to 50 feet, which was already stated by staff. The problem with the language is that it creates the property owner's ability by right to have that wall or fence. So if you imagine the portion of the wall or fence, particularly the portion that could abut the property line with the right-of-way, the way this language is written, a 6-foot-high wooden fence and a 6-foot-high chain-link fence and a 6-foot-high wall could be built along the property line that abuts the right-of-way without any aesthetic review relative to that proposal. So I don't think we're a ranch or a farm, so I can't envision having a wooden fence along the property line border with the right-of-way. That, to me, is not acceptable. But by right, since there is no aesthetic review you would be making it by right, the building official would have to approve it. So I think you either need to do something, one of the two. Make it so that someone who avails this right does so by a special exception, wherein you can then look at the proposal in detail relative to the aesthetics, or simply state in the new language that anyone that avails themselves or falls into that boat, so to speak, that they must first receive some sort of aesthetic approval for what they're proposing before the permit is issued. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes. Thank you, Tom. Board, I'll open it up to questions.
There's one more public comment.
Okay.
Hi, Marie Sapiri. I agree with Mr. Bradford that the proposed language is broad. I also would like a point of clarification. Is this
Can you
limited,
speak into
sorry,
the mic?
to single-family houses, or does this apply more broadly? Because we also have like condo buildings and so forth. Is that, can I ask a question? Or I'll leave that to you. It doesn't appear to be limited to single-family houses, and so I guess I also have concerns about condo buildings having 6-foot walls in front. Second, I think the information that we have currently is not totally sufficient to make a well-informed and reasoned decision in the best interests of the village on a proposal that would apply broadly to many properties of different kinds, if I'm correct about the application. Some issues of the proposed ordinance raises are the proposed 6-foot height limit. Walls are allowed in front of single-family houses along Country Club Drive, but they're only allowed to be 5 feet tall. It would appear to be arbitrary to allow 6-foot walls in other areas. Also, how would the height be measured? For example, Jupiter Island's code has specific measurement requirements that we probably want to have as well. On safety, my first question is about potential flood risk impacts. Do we know what the impact of potential concrete block stucco walls are on the flooding with respect to other properties and public roads? That should be investigated before properties add walls that might divert water. We could get an opinion from an environmental or civil engineer on the effect of something like a wall on stormwater management. Excuse me. Also, it would seem that this analysis would ultimately be location-specific, but the proposed ordinance allows a wall of right. There isn't an application and review process that might help to protect the stormwater management interests of all the residents of the village, but perhaps there should be, and further investigation of this could help us make a good decision. Second, access for fire rescue and emergencies. We should find out from our public safety and fire rescue departments if there are any issues, if there's a locked gate and a 6-foot CBS wall around a property. On community appearance, a 6-foot wall, or 6-foot tall wall or fence is potentially an aesthetic detriment. The proposal does not prohibit chain link fences, for example. As for the streetscape, allowing a 6-foot wall right behind the right-of-way is likely to preclude some types of trees and plants that would enhance the streetscape and provide shade to the sidewalk. There are other options that should be considered. For example, Jupiter Island and Palm Beach have specific landscaping requirements between the wall or fence and the right-of-way, which seems like a good idea. And Jupiter Island also has a setback from the front lot line for any front yard or wall or fence. I don't think there's any rush on this proposal, so it would be prudent for the LPA to take its time to find the information about safety and consider the options for protecting the community appearance. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I address that?
Sure, I'll open the floor. Liz?
Okay. We have a map and we are addressing the properties that are located on Riverside Drive. We've had previously property owners coming in and asking for a variance. We've denied one, but we approved the others, and in approving them, each person, each family had a whole different set of circumstances. But in order to have a variance approved, they had to prove to us, and it was getting to the point where it was just continuity. And I turned around and I asked Lance and Nielsa to please go about and readdress this to make it a little bit easier for these particular residents that are abutting, because their properties are so different along the river. We are not, we're really not addressing anything in the country club. We're addressing this whole particular map. Am I correct, Lance?
That's the intent, correct?
Come on up to the podium, please.
So one point on that is that if properties are later combined down the road, you could end up with a property that meets the dimension requirements that's not in one of those areas. And would that be, that's one of the things that we need to be thinking about.
They would have to apply for a variance.
But under the language here, it doesn't seem to require that. Because if you meet the requirements,
No.
Is the map included? I'm sorry, I guess I would like clarification on that.
Board, I would just ask that all communication go through the chairperson. Now, if you're not a sitting member, you still have to comply with the 3-minute speaking rule unless the chair is willing to grant additional time, just to provide a little bit more structure
Thank
for
you.
the back and forth.
Nilsa?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. For the record, I'm Nilsa Zacarias, Community Development Director. So as the ordinance established, these are for specific lots that comply with these deep lots. And there is a specific measure there, 200 feet, 250 feet. So that is on page 2 of the proposed ordinance. And this is a LPA meeting, so if this board requests, they can recommend, you can recommend further, for example, to install a buffer in front of the, in front of the fence. It could recommend a specific type of materials, so we are here to listen your recommendation.
Thank you. Board, any questions of Nilsa?
Okay, I'm sorry. I asked for this ordinance because of all of the variances, and I remember Mr. Hackett and I just discussing this. Okay, so now I was under the impression that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been reading this, I've read everything. We're doing this so that they can put up their fence and their gates, whatever, to give them a little bit of privacy and protection, because the last ones had children playing in the front, and yet they didn't want the toddlers to go into the main road. My question is, if they want to put up a fence after we do this ordinance, do they have to do any landscaping plans, or they have to pull a permit, and then who reviews the permit to see if everything is copacetic?
If once this ordinance passes, the process will be that a homeowner can apply, a contractor can apply to the building department. So this ordinance is a proposal, it's a proposed ordinance, and if this board would like to have like a hedge in front of the fence toward the right-of-way, we are here to listen your recommendation.
And this ordinance only applies to these property owners?
Applies to all the property owners who has a parcel having a side lot greater than or equal to 250 feet. Yes.
Yeah, that's like the anyway.
Exactly.
Yes.
Any from building line greater than or equal to 50 feet from the property line, as showing on this
Diagram.
graphic.
The graphic that's figures.
Okay,
See.
Page 2.
Page 2.
it's on page 2, yes. But then, I couldn't do, well, first of all, I don't live on a main road, so, what about the people on, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Suppose I live on Tequesta Drive, and that's a main thoroughfare.
This
Those properties
specific
don't-
ordinance that is not location specific, is size specific. So
Okay.
when we read this ordinance,
Size, okay.
B, as the boy says, wall and fences not exceeding 6 feet in height may be located forward of the front of the building line or lots or parcel having a side lot greater than or equal to 200 feet and a front building line greater than or equal to 50 feet from the property line. It does not say it will be on only in this area or that area. A lot that complies with that criteria then could use this ordinance and install this fence.
Both criteria.
Yes, both criteria. The 200 feet and the 50
as well as the
feet.
50 feet.
Huh?
The 250 feet, which is the depth of the lot essentially,
Right.
and then also the 50 feet, which is the front portion of the building.
On page 3, there is a diagram showing exactly
Yeah.
what are the criteria.
I saw that, yeah.
And this was based on the number of variances that
That we were dealing with the people that live on Riverside Drive.
But what about Mr. Bradford's comment
Well, that's-
where someone can put a chain link fence, a wall, and a hedge?
like I said, we are welcome any suggestion, any recommendation. If, for example, this ordinance can have another criteria with regard to aesthetic. It could have also criteria with regard to the person who does this must plant a hedge in front of the fence, so the fence will be a screen, and that's perfectly fine. There are a number of municipalities, Palm Beach, Jupiter Island, that they require that. If you are putting a fence close to the right-of-way, you must leave a room there to plant hedges so you will screen that fence.
So it's at the discretion of the board if you'd like to make a recommendation, including additional things or as is. It's up to your discretion.
Well, I wasn't even thinking it when I was going through this to think of additional things. I mean, like, everybody that's given us, basically I was doing it to save some of these people from paying for a variance and for a planner but I mean, basically I want them to, have their privacy and to protect their children. But the other thing is, I would like to see like a landscaping buffer, the way majority of them, well, they all did. They all did really nice jobs in landscaping in the front, but you could get Joe Schmo who just wants to put up, a fence and, hey, I'm done. So maybe we should address in this ordinance that they have to have like a buffer and landscaping.
And additionally, I think it might be wise to also address in the ordinance that we have a setback
Yeah.
of 10 feet, 15 feet, whatever,
Yeah.
from the property line. So there's room to work.
And the materials.
And materials.
And the material, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Most
I,
important.
what did you say?
Materials.
Oh,
The
okay.
material.
yeah. Tom, did you want to have the floor?
Yes, ma'am.
Nilsa, don't go far.
So I just wanted to say, I think it's admirable that you wanted to find a way to make it easier for a property owner who's in that boat, meaning they have a deep lot and they want to have some privacy and protection for their property. All I was trying to point out was that this language, in my opinion, doesn't really go far enough, and that you should do the things that you're now contemplating doing. But I would throw this out for you to think of in your mind is, don't you think it would look kind of hokey if someone put up a 6-foot wooden fence along their property on Riverside Drive and they installed only a 3-foot hedge? I mean, it just looks, I think you need something that has some sort of aesthetic way to gauge what it's going to look like when they seek to add this proposal. And so you've limited it only to those properties that are 250 feet in depth or greater and have a front yard of 50 feet or
wide.
more.
You're correct.
Yeah, so okay, so that's a very limited number of parcels, but some of those Riverside Drive parcels are some of the finest and most valuable properties in the village of Tequesta, but that doesn't mean, like Liz said, that someone comes along and just puts something that you would never imagine on that spot if you don't have some sort of means to ensure that it doesn't happen. That's all I've been saying.
Here I think I was doing something and thanks.
It just needs a little finite, that's all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
If the board, Madam Chair, if the board requires or recommend that the staff, planning staff, does further research and provide for the first reading, because this ordinance is moving forward to the first reading for council, so staff will provide additional language based on this board and these comments, recommendations. So we don't need to be right now very specific, but we do need a recommendation to add additional language with regard to screening and with regard to aesthetics.
well, yeah, and you don't want them as, I never envisioned somebody putting up a stockade fence along, but
Could happen. Yeah, could happen.
Lance, do you have any suggestions?
It's as Nilsa stated, essentially it's really up to the board to give us a recommendation, so then we can kind of tailor this more geared towards what the board would like. And then we'd push it towards the village council for first reading. So based on your recommendation is what staff would work on.
Can we legally tell somebody they can't put up a stockade fence?
If the code doesn't specifically state pertaining to the aesthetics or view of the fence, then, I mean, whatever the code states is what we have to abide by, unfortunately.
Well, I can't be the only one nobody else wants to say anything?
I mean, if we're ready for motions.
So there's nothing in the current ordinance, let me understand this, that,
Well, we would need landscaping, and I really don't want a stockade fence.
Well, I think that it should just be limited to like the aluminum, because that's pretty much what's along there.
Well, that's what they've all been doing.
Right, but, you know, concrete or block wall, somebody come along and paint an ugly mural on it or something, you know, it's, do you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to do anything.
I know,
horrible
I
to
know.
it.
So are you
how
asking?
specific can you get to the material of the fence, or can't you?
Yeah,
How specific can we get to the material used to create the fence?
So as the code states currently, so when we have, for example, when you get gates and columns and whatnot, that is up to the discretion of the board. That does come back to you guys. If you wanted some sort of language in the code that would be similar to that if it's an aesthetic review of these particular properties and it comes back to the board, that can also be a recommendation of the board.
Well, that's what I would recommend.
And there should be
Absolutely.
a, 10 or 15 foot setback, there should be landscaping, not just a straight hedge.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be formal landscaping, thought out landscaping, I don't know what exactly to say about that other than.
The approval process definitely can be, we can include that into this proposed code, that if a homeowner would like to do this, they need to come, like they currently, if somebody wants to put a gate and columns in front of their home, they need to be approved from planning and zoning board. So we can definitely include that language also, that to put this type of fence, and also the language of aesthetics, buffering, and the approval to come in front of the board.
yeah.
Yes.
Now, the gate and the post, that's already legal, right?
But they come in
to
front
us
of the
to
planning and
approve.
zoning board for approval.
But, yes.
But they are
wouldn't-
legal.
But they wouldn't be applying for a variance.
No.
No.
No, so as it stands currently, the only thing that essentially would require a variance was the fence, hence why this is before you today.
Right.
If a regular resident wanted to put a gate, set a gate and columns anywhere in the village, essentially they're allowed to, they just have to follow the process, which means they appear before this board.
Okay.
So if the recommendation today includes something similar to that, then you are more than willing and welcome to include that in your motion. But the motion is of the discretion of the board.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, you want me to make the motion? I think I can do this. I will make a motion that the ordinance number 3-23 be approved with the provision and with the addition of a 15-foot setback from the front property line. Material content of the fence must be consistent with the area, and upon review of board as well as planning and zoning at site plan, landscaping has to be provided in front of the fence to shield the fence, and all of it has to come before planning and zoning for final review.
I'll second that.
And I'll ask for a roll call vote. Any questions, discussions?
Now, is that, they'll be coming before the, they still have to
Finally, they're
come-
still coming
they
before
still have
us
to
with
come
their,
before
with their
us.
fence,
I see.
correct,
Okay.
yes. We
We
still
get to
have the right,
review
yes.
their plan.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what this is saying.
Then they're not
Yes.
applying for a variance.
No, they're
Right,
not.
right, okay.
No,
Okay.
Okay.
no. Is there a second?
I thought I
Oh,
seconded.
you did? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Okay, now we need a
You
roll
asked
call
for a
vote,
roll.
please.
Janice Strang,
Yes?
Steve Egan,
I'm gonna vote no for that ordinance.
Elizabeth Shelley,
Yes.
Leslie Dasher,
Yes.
Alicia Maggie.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Our next item on the agenda is ordinance number 4-23, an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta, Florida, amending the Village Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Animals, Article 3, Sea Turtle Protection, by repealing this article in its entirety and readopting it in order to indicate the village's adoption of and adherence to Palm Beach County's Sea Coast Protection Regulations, and impart upon Palm Beach County the jurisdiction and enforcement authority for such regulations, and also retain village regulations regarding standards for mechanical beach cleaning, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 10, Animals, shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and the authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes. And Lance, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you guys may remember, we actually had this ordinance in front of us in November 17th. It was part of the Beach Road Design Guidelines. After coordination with the county, we realized that the ordinance was not sufficient, so we actually had, council actually had that removed at some point. So this is brought to you as a new ordinance, and this ordinance is more so to address the county's ordinance, which would have them be the jurisdictional authority for the sea turtle protection and reviews. And we also do have Ms. Teal Kawana here from the county, if you have any more specific questions, but that's the purpose of this ordinance.
And I'll open the floor for questions.
I did have one, so the Village of Tequesta would have no authority over violators, sea turtle violations.
Good.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Teal Kawana. I work for Palm Beach County. I'm an environmental analyst, and I manage our sea turtle and manatee programs. So Palm Beach County, we have our own sea turtle protection ordinance. We have 11 municipalities that have opted in to our ordinance, so that gives us jurisdiction over those municipalities for sea turtle plan review whenever there's new buildings or existing buildings that are putting in new types of lights. We review all of the plans for that. And then we also look at lighting surveys throughout the summer during turtle season and are assessing any violations that are non-compliant with our code and work with the properties on getting them into compliance. We are able to issue notices of non-compliance and also take them to hearing if needed. Typically, we don't have to go that far. Tequesta is actually one of our best places out of the county. We typically don't see a lot of issues here, and if we do, it's very easy for us to work with property management to get those issues resolved, and we rarely have to take anyone to hearing. But if you have any questions about our
So
ordinance.
is Jupiter Inlet Colony part of the county program?
Yes.
Okay.
And there was a question you had, Leslie, about jurisdiction.
I'm just asking that the Village of Tequesta would not be able to.
Essentially, and you can always correct me, essentially with this ordinance, we're giving our jurisdiction pertaining to the county.
Okay,
So
so if the
Tequesta would not-
village observes a violation, a lighting violation, they can do nothing, they just.
It would go to the county.
Okay,
Any other questions? Okay, board, how do you want to proceed? Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Oh, public comment, I'm sorry. We have public comment?
Just for clarification.
Can
so
you state
since-
your name
sorry,
for the
Marie
record?
Superi. For, just to clarify, does the.
Ma'am, I need your name for the record, please.
Sorry, yeah, Marie Superi.
Thank you.
The, does this, I understand that it cedes jurisdiction to the county. Do we have to do that, or can you retain concurrent jurisdiction? I'm not sure what the answer is to that.
Yeah, I would comment on that.
Yeah.
I believe the intent of this is that you are adopting Palm Beach County's regulations and also giving them jurisdiction. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving up
Is
any
it?
authority.
So it's not exclusive jurisdiction? Okay, because All right. And then my other question was on mechanical beach cleaning and what that includes. And maybe I can get some. Does that include adding sand? Because it said alter beach profiles, and I just wasn't sure if that included that. That was my only question.
If you want to take that, you're welcome.
Well, the portion. Hi, Teal Kawana again. So the portion on mechanical beach cleaning was already existing in the former Tequesta ordinance. That's why we decided to leave that in, because that's sea turtle protection measures that we don't cover for in our sea turtle lighting ordinance with the county. So we wanted to leave that section in. As far as the alteration of sand, I don't think the intent was to alter it. I think it was saying to not alter it.
That's my, and that portion of it is regulated by the building department, so that might be a question that we might have to further clarify through the building department. But as Ms. Kawana mentioned, that it's essentially, that was already in the code, and we were just keeping that just because that was something that wasn't in the Palm Beach County code, and since it was already in our code, we wanted to keep it since it was kind of exclusive to Tequesta.
Thank you. Board, any further questions? I'll open it to public comment again. Anybody? Okay, we'll close public comment. How do you want to proceed, board?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 4-23.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay. Next item is ordinance number 5-23, an ordinance of the Village Council. Am I in the right one? Yeah, here we go. An ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta, Florida, amending the Village Code of Ordinances at Chapter 78 zoning at Section 78-117C2 Community Commercial District to include veterinarian office as a special exception use in that zoning district, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 zoning shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes. And Lance, you have the floor.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. So this item was actually heard at the January 30th Village Council workshop. If you actually turn to page 21 of your packet, there's a memo that was heard at the workshop. And the memo reads, it says, in 2013, the village adopted an ordinance 1513, which made veterinary offices a permitted use in the C3 General Commercial Zoning District and added a definition to the village code. Veterinary offices are only permitted in the C3 zoning district. So currently, with this new ordinance, the ordinance would essentially allow for veterinary offices as a special exception use in the C2 zoning district. As of right now, the considerations for these particular parcels in the C2, well, currently, the C3 zoning district has areas that will allow for like post-treatment of dogs or animals after surgeries and whatnot. So during the council workshop, it was mentioned that veterinary offices may only potentially be in freestanding buildings, but at that point, it's really up to the board if you'd like to include it. That's not in this ordinance as of right now, but that was just something that I'd like to mention. But yes, this is before you as a special exception as of right now based on this ordinance.
Then I'll open the floor to the board if you have questions.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know how many of you were on the board when we had that veterinarian that was on US 1 where we had the people behind that in the development complaining because they weren't picking up the poop and the dogs were barking. And I forget what year it was, but it was on US 1, and now it's like a daycare place for the dogs. And we haven't had any complaints about that, at least for now. But my thing is, I really want a veterinarian's office to be a standalone building. I really don't want it in a shopping plaza. It should really be a standalone. Only because with the plazas, we have residents that are behind. And it's opening up Pandora's box again with everything that we've previously been through. And then we had to change things in the codes. So I think that standalone would be the best thing to do. I don't know if any of you remember that little scenario. It was over 10 years ago.
I think it was in
This is
13,
you,
because
Mrs.
I was
Lemon?
here in 13. I remember.
You remember that? See, Steve? So,
I remember.
Steve, you got comments?
I want to hear a public comment. I think now there's all these people here.
Yeah, we got people here tonight. Come on, guys.
There's a whole bunch
Let
of
us know how you
people
feel.
here.
Thomas Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail, Tequesta. First of all, let me say I love animals, and I believe that veterinarians are necessary to give them the proper care that they may need from time to time. So what I'm concerned about is that today veterinarian offices are only allowed in C3. C3 is traditionally a much broader commercial district that has many more uses than, say, C1 or C2. And so what's being proposed is that C2 be allowed to have veterinarian offices therein. And when you do that, you can look at the map that Vance, or is it Vince or Vance?
Lance.
Vance, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Lance, I'm sorry. I work with a guy named Vance, so I get it confused. You're opening up the possibility of more interaction between abutting properties to C2 that are residential properties. And that's where the potential conflict can arise. And so long as the code says that they may only take the care and the keeping of animals, these are my words, I'm not following the code verbatim, is indoors only, well, that's a good thing, particularly if a residential property is abutting the office of the vet. But it's really the definition of this that gives me the most concern. Bear with me. It says, I see wiggle room in this language is what I'm getting at. It says that what's a vet? It's a professional office means, well, a professional office means the office of a person engaged in any occupation, vocation, or calling, not purely commercial, mechanical, et cetera, et cetera. And in addition, it goes on, vet office means a state licensed facility for medical and or surgical treatment and care of animals. Such facilities may include 24-hour emergency care and or animal boarding associated with medical or surgical treatment. However, any such boarding must occur inside the facility. So far, so good. Then it says, general boarding that is not associated with medical or surgical treatment is prohibited. Okay, general boarding that is not associated with medical or surgical treatment is prohibited. Well, a smart vet would say, okay, I just did surgery on this dog, and I'm gonna keep that dog outside because it's associated with the medical activity that I put on that animal. So I think there's the capability to wiggle out of this definition that's currently written. So I think you need to tighten it, is the essence of my comment.
Thank you, Tom.
Marie Superi. The proposed ordinance affects all of the C2 district as discussed and the surrounding neighborhoods. So given that scope, I think the ordinance is not yet ripe for consideration because we don't yet have all the information to enable the board to make a decision ordered to the best interest of the village. The procedures for making a zoning change set out in the code provide the avenue for collecting that information. That procedure is the way that the village can identify all the consequences and ramifications of a change to the zoning code, which are important to making a well-founded decision. On the process, section 78-32 tells us that legal descriptions, surveys, and importantly, other information required to consider the requested zoning change shall be furnished by the applicant. That code section also contemplates the investigation of the facts involved in any petition to amend the regulations established in the zoning chapter. This process is to make sure the LPA has the necessary information to make an informed decision. For example, we don't yet have facts about the surrounding properties, both in and around C2, and specifically whether there are alternatives, although some have been mentioned, to achieving the purpose here that would minimize the impacts to them. We also lack some facts about the proposed use, such as exactly how the property would be used. Under the current definition that Mr. Bradford read, 24-hour emergency care and boarding for medical care would be allowed, but we don't know if the applicant here would like to do those things. If not, then that definition could be changed to remove them, and that would eliminate some of the potential impacts. Also, this property and other C2 properties on North Cypress are not all that far from a well-field drawdown zone, which might be a material consideration depending on the details of the proposed use. And also, we don't have an explanation of why this is consistent with the comp plan. Sorry. On the substance, veterinary offices are permitted in C3 and the adjoining, and according to the zoning map, none of C3 is directly adjacent to a residential area. There's at least an alley between C3 and the one residential property off of Fiesta Avenue. That's not the case in C2, so we should carefully consider that. And second, the proposed changes the rule for the entire C2 district, but they're more narrowly tailored options. Some of those could be eliminating bordering entirely, limiting clinics to standalone buildings occupied by a single tenant, and to eliminate any potential impacts to adjacent tenants in a plaza or multiple office building. And there could be landscaping, green space, noise, and to address the problems that we previously had, perhaps even sanitation requirements for any dog walking area. Given the consequence of zoning changes, there shouldn't be a rush to make a decision until after we've had a full opportunity to collect information and do a full review to properly consider all the potential impacts of this change and all the options available to protect the interests of all residents. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yes, Peter Hoffline.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. Pete Hoffines, 4408 Colette Drive, Tequesta, Florida. Nice to see you again, Mr. Brandenburg. Just wanted to get up here and voice an opinion of support for the ordinance. I think any time that a municipal staff is looking at their code, which is intended to be a living document to adjust to certain changes in the marketplace, consumer trends, technology, and things like that. I think that's a good thing, looking at your uses as things evolve over time. Some of the comments that have been made, I certainly think have some merit to them, but establishing this use as a special exception, I think, builds in the parameters to address their concerns. Any applicant would have to come forward for a special exception application. They would have to demonstrate that they're meeting all of your land development requirements in terms of landscaping, setbacks, buffers. Depending on the use, that's why it would be a special exception. There would be certain additional things that staff would have to look at. Certainly with the boarding, there may be some wiggle room in there, but maybe if there's certain language or through the special exception process, conditions of approval can be placed on a project that would mitigate those concerns. For instance, if you're concerned about boarding, you could only have boarding as it relates to a surgical procedure for the necessary recovery time that that animal may need. That would certainly eliminate the need for, or the wiggle room of anybody just, hey, I operated on your dog's ear, I'm going to the Bahamas for a month, you know, you keep, I mean, certainly I don't think that is the intent of what people would do, so you could always relate it to surgical care. In terms of impacts on well field management, if things are being taken care of indoors, it's hooked up to the sanitary sewer system. The village has a very great water utility. I don't see how that's going to impact the well fields. In addition to that, many residents already have animals that walk their dogs up and down the public right-of-ways that may or may not pick up their animals' droppings. Certainly, that would impact, has not had any impact on well fields to this point. So, again, I applaud staff for looking at their code, keeping it current with new uses and trends, and I can be in the audience to address any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up, public comment.
Hello, my name is Miles Rowley, 99.
Could you move the mic down? I'm hard of hearing, so thank you. That's fine.
99 Fairview West, Tequesta, and I've been a resident for about 12 years now. I'm a veterinarian, actually working in Stewart, and very much looking forward to the opportunity to provide care here in Tequesta. Been holding out for a long time for the right opportunity. So very much appreciate your consideration on this matter and considering this ordinance. I would like to point out a few things. Really love your suggestions, and all of those have a lot of merit. I would like to point out, though, that some of the, or at least one of the parcels on C3 that is currently used as a veterinarian, while it does have the alleyway in the rear, something that has not been discussed is another benefit to limiting this to freestanding building would be to have adequate pet relief area, which I definitely think would be in the best interest of the pets and my patients. The particular parcel on C3 off South Cypress doesn't even have a single blade of grass. So I could therefore point out that some of the locations that might be in C2 might be actually better than the warehouse district. And like Pete mentioned, with a special exception application, would be very happy to have proposed site plans with adequate pet relief areas, fenced in if necessary, and pretty much in today's world, we're surrounded by a whole lot of boarding facilities. But general practitioners pretty much practice, they don't really do boarding, really. It would be primary. I love the idea of limiting it to hospitalized patients, post-surgical, due to the noise and the concerns like that. So here for any questions, and again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Public comment? Anybody? Nilsa?
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Just to clarify, the current definition of a veterinary office specifically says general boarding that is not associated with medical or surgical treatment is prohibited. So it's very clear that on the definition. Also, staff is proposing a special exception use. So it will not permit it by right. So that means that they, before this is approved, it will need to come in front of the village council, and the special exception use process has a number of criteria that the applicant must fulfill, must complete. It has a criteria with regard to safety, with regard to general appearance, so noise, so that's the reason they call a special exception uses. So they need to apply and come in front of council. At that time, the village council may impose conditions of approvals. For example, hours of operations or specific other conditions of approval. So that's one thing that, then also, when the workshop was held with village council on January 30, at that time, there was there was a mention about if this is approved in all C2 district, it will, as you can see on the map, the red, and also on the map that is on your package, the C2 district is a very large district. However, there is room, and that will be up to this board recommendation if this use could be a special exception use on C2 but only for standalone buildings. So there is always, as you see in the map, there are in situ many shopping plazas, and the shopping plazas accommodate restaurants, accommodate retail that might not be conducive to a veterinary office. However, a standalone building could, and especially if the board consider that it will be an special exception use that could have additional conditions. Thank you.
Well,
Go ahead. Question?
well, that's why I said if we do this, we need to do a only because of what
Freestanding
we've
building.
had to previously. And Steve remembers, so, and it wasn't a pleasant meeting.
And I think as a pet owner, I think it's safety for the people holding the pets, getting them across the parking lot, et cetera. I think it's all good, yeah. I like that idea. So you're gonna make a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion to approve, what is the ordinance? Ordinance number
5-23.
5-23, but in it to have that it needs to be a standalone building in the C2 district. Because then I think you're not opening it up the way we had to deal with the last one. And I'm not saying that every vet does the same, but it's different. Just trying to make things a little bit easier.
Do we have a second?
I'll make a second.
Discussion? Leslie?
I guess I don't know what problem they're talking about, but, I mean, Tequesta already has leash laws, cleanup laws, noise laws. You know, I would have thought a lot of those would have taken care of any problem.
Let me go back.
Well, that's okay, don't go back.
This building right
Well,
here,
that's okay, but that could happen at a freestanding building. You could still have somebody that doesn't clean up their mess, allows the dogs out and barks and,
but they
you know,
wouldn't
you
be
could
so
still
close.
have a problem. So, I mean, there are laws that cover a lot of that, not saying that they shouldn't be in a freestanding building, I'm just suggesting that there could still be problems. I don't have a problem with vet offices in this district, that would be fine with me. I'm just saying that a freestanding building isn't going to solve all the problems. But we have the ordinances already for noise and cleaning up after your pets and such, so I don't see much of a problem. But
Okay. Ms. Maggio?
no.
No comment? Then take a roll call, please.
Jenna Strand,
Yes?
Steve Egan,
Yes.
Elizabeth Shaw,
Yes,
Leslie Dasher,
Yes.
Teresa Matthews.
Yes.
Thank you. Alrighty. Our next item is, Nilsa's gonna have the floor, and we are going to discuss, discussion on the Beach Road Design Guidelines Checklist.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor, board members, Nilsa Zacharias, Community Development Director. Let me tell you, I'm so happy to be here tonight presenting to all of you these Beach Road Design Guidelines. So, as you know, it has been a process. So, and this is the night where we can definitely say that the ordinance was approved. So, just to refresh our memories, we had a number of public participation meetings. The first one was June 29, 2022, with Beach Road residents and any at-large village residents. And also October 3rd, there was a second workshop with also residents and the village council. Then, as you are aware, November 17, 2022, there was an LPA meeting. And then December 8th was the council first reading of this ordinance. And I'm happy to report that last week, February 9, 2023, Council adopted Ordinance 223 that incorporates the design guidelines into the village code. So the purpose of this discussion, this review, is to, well, great. Now we have this document, 72 pages. It has been adopted by the Village Council. What is our next step? How do we use this? We have a beautiful car. We need to take it for a drive now. So let's move forward so we can see this. I am not going to read this definition, but this is part of the code that was adopted, is the definition of design guidelines. And one of the key parts of this definition is that the intent of this design guideline is to assist applicants in meeting village code requirements for buildings and site aesthetics contained in Chapter 22. So it's a long definition, but that was the spirit of this code amendment to include that specific criteria or definition in the village code. So, as you recall, we have discussed this many times. We had one-on-one meetings, there was LPA, first reading. So this is the document. And what is the purpose of this document? And I will just summarize what is the purpose. Is number one, to support development that is consistent with the village vision. So as you are aware, Beach Road is in a full process of redevelopment. We have already, Sea Glass is almost at CO stage. Then we also the village also approved 300 Beach Road, and at this moment is under full review 250 Beach Road. The board, the Planning and Zoning Board still did not come in front of you the 250 Beach Road. So because there is this active redevelopment on this corridor, the Village Council directed staff to prepare some guidelines to address what is the vision of that corridor, what is the character of a small village of Tequesta that would like to protect for that corridor. So number 5, I think, is extremely important. Now we have a document that communicates clearly to developers the goals of the village aesthetics during the design phase. So this is the document that is now in our website, and when anybody approach the village with potential applications, now the village community development can direct the developer to take a look this document. So I always said there are 2 key parts of this large document. One of the key parts is the checklist. So the checklist is at the end of the document. It's on the appendix, page 47 of the document. So this is where we truly, it's a tool that will allow us to review this application. So, like it says there, the checklist is a tool to assist in the design and review of the proposed development. The checklist presents a summary of all the criteria that are included on that 70 pages. So this is the summary. However, the developer also needs to read the document. But when we were putting together this document, staff, we felt that was extremely important to summarize and to summarize the key points of these design guidelines. So now the applicant now has this checklist that we'll need to complete and provide an explanation how each design element is accomplished in the proposed development. So the purpose of this discussion is to go through that checklist, and because from now on, once we receive, after this, the ordinance was adopted last week, any application that is submitted after last week must comply, must provide this checklist and how is accomplished each criteria. So, and also staff, we will be reviewing that, and the staff report that this board will receive will have a specific section that will say design guidelines, compliance, or analysis. So it will be pages that will be included, and also it will be a tool for the board to review and make recommendations or questions to the applicant based on the design guidelines. So, have you read the design guideline? And I know you are extremely familiar with all of this. We have talked many times about this. So, we will provide this to the developer on a Word doc so they can actually type on this. Each of these criteria, for example, with regard to height and massing, and that's the key question, how is this achieved? Number one, I'm not going to go each of them, but for example, number one, the building is not an urban form represented by only one rectangular block. High variations create human scale. How do you achieve this on your proposed development? So the applicant now has a specific box where they can type and explain to all of us how it's achieved. So as you recall, on the design guidelines, page 6 has, again, this photo that is sometimes it's more important to define what we don't want. So, and this is page 6, so it's very clearly. And then that is what the village would like to move away from. So, and then here is where we are talking about height and massing. What is it? What are the qualities? You know, we are looking for transition volumes to help integration with the surrounding buildings. Variation along facades, along buildings, prevent visual dominance from the street edge. So these are some of the criteria that are included on the design guideline. So when we talk about articulation, most of the time, everybody throws this word articulation here and there. So not anymore. This design guideline specifically defines 3 categories: top articulation, the middle articulation, and the ground level articulation. So, and has many of these elements where the developer needs to explain how is this achieved. For example, top articulation emphasizes a distinctive profile, projecting parapets, upper level step back, high variation, variety of roof line. So throughout the design guideline, we have provided several examples of articulations, you know. And also we define what are articulations and what are the different ways for top articulation, the middle, and the ground articulation, and provided examples. With regard to building materials and colors, the design guidelines proposes a palette of materials and colors. Also proposes primary or principal colors and secondary colors. For example, trims could be definitely secondary colors. This drawing that is in front of you is also part of the document, and where we recommend the color palette and provide examples how only through color and materials, you know, a building can look aesthetically interesting, can be pleasing from the right of way, and can also have cohesiveness with the adjacent buildings. The design guidelines also include specific criteria with regard to building orientation. For example, building orientation takes advantage of passive or active solar strategies. So we have some pages in the design guideline, and all what we are asking to the developer is how is this achieved? So then now we have a set of criteria, the village has a set of criteria, and is giving these options to the developer. With regard to vehicular access and parking, so we again give different examples how important are to have driveways, that are actually pervious material, and we talk about garage or surface parking. So, and we have a specific criteria: parking garage for resident and guest parking, surface parking, screen buffer from the adjacent roadway, driveway is not visually dominant, adequate light features selected based on functional value, aesthetic quality, and environmental practices. So again, please, developer, tell us how do you accomplish this. And then with regard to open space, we also talk that open space, it can be a balcony, roof terrace, common areas are accessible and connected by a pedestrian circulation system, and we provided several examples through the guidelines. We talk about refuse areas that once they are provided, the fence around needs to be in harmony with the building. And that definitely trash receptacles are hidden from the public street and views. So we highlight that these must needed features, they need to be appropriate placed and screened. The guidelines also include signage and lighting. We stress how important is landscaping at the base of the signage. We also stress that it needs to be attractive, easy to read, compatible with the building style. With regard to the specific site planning, compatibility, and transition, this is very important that the proposed building is compatible with the surrounding and offer transition elements with regard to the adjacent buildings. Upper floors or sidewalks are step back, so windows areas and balconies are farther from the property line. Architecture design provides transition to mitigate height, bulk, and scale impacts. So all of this is, please, developer, how are you achieving this? How are you accomplishing these criteria? So, and then also with regard to landscaping, as you know, Mr. Parker, he has reviewed very much into detail the existing plant palettes. He updated the prohibited species, so that was already approved as a separate ordinance, and now they are part of our code. So there was a very well-reviewed process. We also increased, as you recall, we increased the buffer, the requested landscape buffer, because the code was asking only 10-feet buffer on the side, and these are very tall buildings. So Mr. Parker, working with us, we proposed 15-feet buffer, which was approved and adopted, approved by the Village Council. So we are offering more landscaping. Also, the guidelines propose a plant palette, because sometimes we hear from developers, we are not sure, what do you like, what does the village want? Well, now it's very specific. We are proposing a plant palette. We offer in the guidelines many examples with regard to landscape buffers, plant palette list, foundation plantings. And I believe that one of the biggest contributions of these design guidelines is the public streetscape. So we not only address the specific private property, but also what's going on the sidewalk, because that's might be that personal experience. It's really it's a personal experience when you are walking through the sidewalk. How does it look? What are the amenities? So we offer a number of alternatives. For example, lighting, benches, street furniture to support pedestrian use in the corridor. Also, we are offering suggestions with regard to landscaping and lighting. And obviously, we would love for the utilities to be buried underground. And once a developer comes, now they have all these lists. This is all what the village has a vision for. And we were proposing like this drawing through the guidelines, Mandarin sidewalks with shade trees. And I think this is a very important slide. Okay, from now on, what is next? So what is next is that site plan reviews applications received after adoption of Ordinance 223, which was adopted last week by Village Council, must comply with the new code language that includes the design guidelines. So site plan review will include an analysis of the aesthetics according to the design guideline. So from now on, when a developer applies for the beach road, we will expect that design guideline criteria to be filled up and explain how are they achieving all of those elements. Also, the staff report that you will receive will have a section that will address design guidelines analysis. So, because up to now, and I will be very candid, Lance and I have been providing many comments with regard to the aesthetics to the developer. However, there was nothing on the code that will support, our recommendations, or, we will say, consider this, consider that. But now we were needing this tool in our toolbox. Now we have it. And also P&Z board could ask questions, make comments, make recommendations with regard to the aesthetic of the building based on these design guidelines. So I'm truly happy too that we have this tool.
Yes.
I have one comment, and then I'll open the floor to you. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. You and Lance have worked very hard on this. Congratulations. Great product. Are you, at this point with this, are you confident now that you have the meat behind you with the developers?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Liz, you got the floor.
Okay. How do we make changes?
Changes to.
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate, okay? We get one guy, we get the first guy that comes in, I shouldn't say guy, but you get the first person that comes in, and then you say, oh, we forgot this. This is something, we're not all perfect. So how do we go about to make changes, like after we start doing some of this stuff, and then you get the feel of the ground? It's like me with the variances with the ordinance. I mean, how do you go about do you have to make an ordinance? I mean, do you have to change the ordinance or the guidelines?
That's a great question, because you don't know what you have until you take it for a drive.
Yeah.
So this is a living document, as the code is a living document. So after, 1 year or whenever is, necessary, we can definitely go back to the design guideline, propose changes, and go through the process, So obviously there will be an LPA, first reading, second reading. This is a document. So I think I'm just looking forward to start actually implementing this with the upcoming developers. So we don't have any new development now, new application, but we are looking forward to. And it's a great recommendation. I don't know if this board knows, but Lance and I have kept for years, we call it a glitch list. Every time that we see something in the code that needs to be updated, amended, we just put it there. It's a Word doc where we compile all the code changes. So once a year, we, through Mr. Allen, we have a workshop with the council, and we bring all the proposed code changes and listen to the village council recommendations. So we will proceed the same way. Maybe we will have another glitch list for design guidelines specifically.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I'll open the floor right now to public comment. Thank you, Nilsa. Tom, go ahead.
Tom Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail. I support this 100%. I even said so at the original meeting. It's great, but the devil's in the details. And I would encourage you all to be highly supportive of Lance and Nilsa in them doing their job, similar to what the chair has mentioned earlier. Do they have the tools? But they need your support, okay? On Beach Road, you're going to have high-powered zoning attorneys and high-powered planners and architects that have been down this road 1,000 times, and they know how to pull every trick in the book to get what they want for their client. So what is very important is to give Lance and Nilsa all of your support and to give them the courage to stand up right here in front of you and say, this person has not done an adequate job. And not be afraid of the rush to build a tax base and all of these things that go with it. Give them your support to know that you back them 100% when they're doing their job per the documents in question that say what they can and cannot do. The other thing is, I would urge you, I'm talking to staff now, look closely at this code. My feeling is underground utilities are not a wish, it's a mandate, number one. And number two, the village is undergoing streetscape plans right now, different streetscapes for different locations. If a developer comes into Beach Road and you want streetscapes, it's not just trees, it can be benches and ballard, but lighting, the whole 9 yards, that might set the tone for what you end up having on Beach Road. So be very careful about that. And if you adopt a streetscape before a new development comes in, make them adhere to it. Okay, it's outside of the bound of their property, but it's okay. Developers want you, the village, to tell them what you want. They hate playing a guessing game because it costs them big bucks. Be specific and support these people and ask for what you want, and you shall receive, I guarantee it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other public comment? Go ahead.
I guess I'm public. Jean McEldowney, 275 Beach Road. Thank you. They're all across the street from where I am. And Regency, although nothing has happened yet, the action over there that started 2 days ago is unbelievable. So Savoy is parking all of their vehicles at Regency because they now own Regency. So I don't know if that was in our original plan or thoughts, but since I guess it's Jeffrey Soffer and Perko own both. So Regency now will be their trucks. It's fine with me because otherwise they'd be on my property parking. So, but it is happening. Finally, let's, do it. But Savoy did not get to use this. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see what Savoy is going to do. It seems lovely, but I wish it had that. But Regency.
So can you clarify, so 250 Beach Road is the one, that's what you're referring to as Savoy. They are not under these guidelines.
No.
I'm asking, I don't know, I'm asking.
Savoy was approved, and it
Yes.
actually came through this board. It's 300 Beach Road.
300 Beach.
The Regency property is 250 Beach Road, which is to the south of that.
250.
And I'm directly across the street
Okay.
from both.
So I
Middle
thought
of
we
both.
had asked that they were gonna do parking at the Coral Cove South, which is the county parcel where they were parking for Sea Glass.
Sea
Because
Glass.
it's the same guys. And I actually asked that question.
Did you?
And the guy that represented said, oh yeah, we're gonna park in the county. And I'm like, the county is allowing you to park? I'm just telling, that's what, I asked him that exact question. I said, where are all these guys gonna park? And he said, oh, right, we're just with Sea Glass. But that gate is shut and they're not parking there anymore.
They are parking at Regency.
Nilsa.
So, but really, it's available. There's no one there. It's a
Yeah, it's
huge
their
property
property,
with no
yeah, they
people, no one parking there. So in a way, for all of us, we kind of thought these trucks would be pulling across our property every day, all day, and parking on the street. And I mean, we just were expecting terrible things. So it's okay, and it really is happening. I didn't see that a permit to bring the building down had happened, but something is. So, but thank you so much. It's so important. I mean, I'm still there, and I didn't know what I was going to look at for the rest of how long it's going to be across the street. And I think it's going to be beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Lance.
Nilsa, just your thoughts. Perhaps maybe we should put something into these design guidelines about employee parking during construction. What are your thoughts?
Well, I just want to clarify very, very clearly two things. 300 Beach Road was already approved, and they did not have this document. 250 Beach Road, they applied before this document was approved. So they are in process. We already had a development review committee meeting. We provided them comments. So if you ask me, Nilsa, do they have to comply with the design guidelines? No, because they applied before this was adopted. And to clarify this, we had the development review committee for 250 Beach Road, and part of our comments, there were so many comments, was comment number 2, I think is please consider completing the attached checklist. So we did provide it, and we asked for their consideration to please fill up the the checklist. So we have not received a resubmittal yet. So I cannot say if they listen to our pleas or not. So we are waiting for a resubmittal. I just want to be extremely clear with regard to that.
Okay.
I think we weren't aware of that.
And then I'll ask again about construction parking. Do you think that should be part of this design plan?
So with regard to construction sites, the building department has specific requirements. So I will defer that question to the village building official. With regard to demolition, with regard to parking on, during construction and all of that, that is under the building department procedures.
Okay, thank you. Board, I'll open it to you. Do you have any questions?
I have one question, and it's dealing with Sea Glass, only because I had somebody stop me who happens to be a realtor. And I told them that we did not get their governing documents, when we approved the site plan. But she was very upset over the fact that at Sea Glass, that one unit would have multiple owners.
That's a very good question. So let me just clarify this. and our attorney is here also. So the village does not regulate the ownership of each unit.
That's what that's what I had said, but, I mean, you know, she says, well, isn't it in the governing, I said, we don't, we don't review the governing documents.
Can you clarify that? Are you saying it's a timeshare? I don't understand.
They specifically said to me that there is one particular unit that there are 2 or 3 owners. Now, she didn't tell me if they were family members or whatever, but some people were upset, and I'm like, that's not under our jurisdiction.
I say that's up to their governing board.
Just for clarification's sake, as Nielsen mentioned, ownership is not regulated by the village. However, I will answer Steve's question, which timeshares are prohibited in the village.
Right.
So they're not allowed to do timeshares.
May I?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm sorry.
So, you scared me, Liz. Back when I was village manager, we always got the articles of incorporation, the covenants and deed restrictions, the bylaws, et cetera, et cetera. Are we talking about something different?
This is a different building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a condominium, siglas. So when they come in front of council for final approval, yes, they don't provide. But however, through the process, through the building department, they provide later on all the documents and everything. So if the building official was here, I could have asked, have you received all the documents? That's
Developments are different than the condos. They're under different.
Right. Well, it has to be recorded. All those
Well, yeah,
documents
but
must
I
be
mean, that's
recorded.
not my
Yes,
problem.
it's Florida-
there are
it's Florida
specific
statute
regulation of
17.
Florida statutes,
Yeah, as far
specific
as-
regulations
Yeah.
with regard to condominiums.
And condominiums are 718s. Yeah, exactly. So that's their board.
And you know that.
Yes, too well, thank you. All right, we'll open the floor to public comment. We'll close for public comment. Staff comment?
None.
None? Board comment? All right,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
and may I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Lance.
I never heard of it.
I think multiple.
You and a boyfriend.